Another run. That's all it ever is, just another run on the endless, unspooling ribbon of American asphalt. This one was a simple milk route, Arizona bound. I'd picked up a load in Flagstaff, a cool, pine-scented relief, and now I was heading deep into the belly of the desert, down towards the scorched earth around Phoenix. The cab of my old Kenworth was my whole world. The familiar hum of the diesel engine, the faint smell of stale coffee and sweat, and the constant, hypnotic vibration through the steering wheel. I know this road, I-17, like I know the back of my own hand. It's a study in contrasts. You start high, where the air is thin and the world feels clean, and then you descend. You descend into a vast, open oven where the heat shimmers off the blacktop in dizzying waves. The juniper and pines give way to skeletal saguaros, those lonely sentinels of the desert, standing silent judgment over everything that passes. My schedule was tight, as always. The warehouse in Phoenix doesn't care about fatigue. They care about their refrigerated goods arriving on time. The first few hours were uneventful. I had the satellite radio on, some classic rock station fighting through the static, but mostly it was just me and my thoughts. You get a lot of time to think out here, too much, sometimes. You replay old arguments, remember old faces you'll probably never see again, and you try to ignore the slow, creeping loneliness that this job cultivates like a poisonous weed. The dashboard lights were a soft, green glow, the only stars I had under the fading purple twilight. I watched the sun die a spectacular death behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Night in the desert is a different beast altogether. The heat doesn't leave. It just retreats from the air and seeps back up from the ground. The darkness is absolute, a heavy velvet blanket pierced only by my headlights. Those twin beams become your entire reality, carving out a small, moving cave of light in an ocean of nothing. It's easy to get hypnotized. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump of the tires over the expansion joints, the endless unspooling of the dashed white line. It's a lullaby for the weary. I'd been driving for maybe 8 hours straight, my body running on autopilot and caffeine. That's when the first weird thing happened. A shape darted across the road at the very edge of my high beams. It was fast, too fast for a coyote, and its form was wrong. It didn't run on 4 legs. It seemed to scramble, a loping, disjointed movement. My heart hammered against my ribs for a second, my hands tightening on the wheel. But just as quickly, it was gone, swallowed by the darkness. You see things out here. Your mind plays tricks. A tumbleweed becomes a crouching man, a shadow becomes a hole in the world. I shook my head, took a long swig of my now cold coffee, and blamed it on the fatigue. It was just a trick of the light. It had to be. You meet all kinds at the truck stops. The lifers with faces like cracked leather, the young guns full of fire and stupid risks, and the quiet ones, like me, who just want to fuel up, grab a bad coffee, and keep moving. I pulled into a lonely stop just past Cord's Junction, a place that was little more than a flickering neon sign and a couple of pumps. The air was still hot, carrying the scent of diesel fumes and fried food. I needed to shake the chill that the last hour of driving had planted in me. Inside, the diner was a time capsule from the 70s, with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that probably hadn't worked in a decade. I slid onto a stool at the counter and ordered the grease special eggs, bacon, hash browns, the whole cardiac arrest on a plate. A couple of other drivers were hunched over their meals, not talking. The waitress, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, filled my mug without asking. It was the old-timer in the booth next to me who broke the silence. He had a map spread out on the table, the paper kind, and he was tracing a route with a gnarled finger, headed south on the 17. He asked, his voice a dry rasp. I just nodded, my mouth full of egg. "You watch yourself on that stretch past Black Canyon City," he said, not looking at me, especially at night. I swallowed. "Dear?" I asked, because that's the usual hazard. He finally looked up, and his eyes were old, too old for his face. "No, not dear." He took a slow sip of his coffee. "The people around here, they hang things over the road." In the passes, the way he said the people held a weight, a respect. He meant the tribes, the Navajo, the Hopi. I'd heard whispers of this before. Tourist trinkets, I'd always thought. "Lucky Charms," I prompted, trying to keep it light. His smile was thin and humorless, something like that. "They call them dream catchers, but not for people. For the road itself." He leaned forward slightly, and the other drivers had gone quiet, listening. They say the road, it dreams bad dreams. The hypnosis of the white line, the fatigue that makes you see things, the heat mirages that look like water. All of it, those things, they catch those dreams before they get to you. It was a good story, the kind of spooky campfire tale drivers tell to pass the time. I gave him a noncommittal grunt and went back to my food, but his words had stuck a hook in me. I remembered the scrambling thing in my headlights, a bad dream of the road. I paid my bill and walked back out into the oppressive night, the story feeling a little less like a story and a little more like a warning. Back in the cab, the engine rumbled to life, a familiar and comforting sound. I pulled out of the truck stop's island of light and was immediately consumed by the darkness again. The old-timer's words echoed in my head, mingling with the memory of that strange, loping shadow. The road dreams bad dreams. It was a ridiculous notion. Asphalt and concrete don't dream, but fatigue does. Loneliness does. The road began its steep, winding descent into Black Canyon. This is the most treacherous part of the I-17, a series of sharp grades and tight curves carved right through the mountain. My Jake brake kicked in, that loud, stuttering whir that always makes me feel like the truck is protesting the whole endeavor. I downshifted, my hands working the gear shift and the wheel with a practiced, unconscious rhythm. The canyon walls rose up on either side, sheer faces of rock that my headlights could barely scratch, making the world feel even smaller, more claustrophobic. It was in the canyon that the silence in the cab began to feel heavy. I turned the radio back on, but it was just static now, a hissing white noise that was somehow worse than the quiet. I switched it off. The only sounds were the groan of the engine, the whine of the Jake brake, and the wind screaming past my window. I found myself scanning the darkness beyond the guardrails, not for animals, but for something else, for a shape hanging in the air. And then I saw it. Just as I rounded a particularly sharp bend, my high beam swept across the gorge ahead. Suspended between two rock pillars on either side of the highway, maybe 50 feet up, was something. It was huge, easily the size of my truck's wheel. Even in the brief glance, I could make out the intricate, web-like pattern within the circular frame. Feathers and beads dangled from its bottom, twisting in the wind. A dream catcher, an enormous, impossibly large dream catcher. It was both beautiful and profoundly unsettling. It was exactly as the old man had described. It wasn't a trinket, it was a statement. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I drove directly under it. For a split second, the shadow of its web passed over my windshield, a fleeting, intricate darkness. I had a sudden, irrational urge to duck. I gripped the wheel tighter and pushed the accelerator, wanting to get out from under its gaze. It felt like driving through a gateway, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what was on the other side. The canyon eventually spat me out onto a slightly flatter, straighter stretch of highway. The dream catcher was behind me, but the feeling of dread it had planted in me was now taking root and growing. The landscape here was bleaker, emptier. The saguaros stood like an army of the dead in the faint starlight. My eyes were tired, gritty from staring too long. I kept blinking, trying to clear the fatigue. That's when the mirages started, not the shimmering pools of water you see in the daytime. These were different. In the periphery of my vision, I'd see things. A figure standing by the side of the road, its head tilted at an impossible angle. A cluster of dark, human-like shapes huddled together, which would then dissolve into a stand of cholla cactus as I got closer. My heart would leap into my throat each time, only to be followed by a wave of embarrassed relief. It was just the road dreaming its bad dreams, just like the old man said. I was just tired, that was all. I decided I needed another break, just a few minutes to close my eyes and reset. I saw a sign for a scenic overlook pull-out and guided the big rig onto the cracked pavement. I killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. I leaned my head back against the rest and closed my eyes, but the second I did, the image of that huge dream catcher flashed behind my eyelids. I opened them again, staring out into the desert. And then I looked up. The pullout gave me a clear, unobstructed view back up the road, towards the mouth of the canyon I had just exited. And there, silhouetted against the slightly less dark sky, was another one of the giant dream catchers. It was far away, but the size of it was still discernible. I squinted, my tired eyes trying to make out the details in the web. It was just a dark lattice work from this distance. But then something made my blood run cold. There was something caught in it. It wasn't a leaf or a piece of trash. This was a large, dark mass, tangled deep in the center of the web. It was writhing, a slow, sinuous, struggling motion. It was the size and shape of a man, but it was all wrong, too long, too thin, a pitch-black silhouette that seemed to absorb the faint ambient light. It was a hole in the shape of a person, and it was trapped, fighting against the threads that held it. A tremor, a violent shudder, passed through the form, and I could almost hear a silent, psychic scream across the distance. I fumbled for the door handle, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I had to get out of there. I had to move. This wasn't a mirage. This wasn't fatigue. This was real. The engine roared to life, a jarringly loud sound in the profound quiet. I didn't even bother with a pre-trip check. I just threw the truck into gear and peeled out of the overlook, the tires spitting gravel. My eyes were glued to the rearview mirror, watching that distant, terrible sculpture until a bend in the road mercifully hid it from view. What was that? What in God's name had I seen? A trick of the shadows, a massive bird tangled in the wires. But no bird moved like that. No bird had that substance to its darkness. I was driving too fast now, pushing the Kenworth harder than I should on a downhill grade. The white lines in the center of the road began to blur into a solid, glowing streak. The hypnotic effect was stronger than ever, but now it felt malicious. It felt like the road was trying to lull me, to pull me into its own nightmare. I shook my head violently, slapping my own cheek to stay sharp. It catches the bad dreams, the old man had said. But what if it was full? What if the nightmares started to overflow? A sign flashed by, Phoenix, 60 miles an hour. Just one more hour, I could make it. The desert started to change again. The signs of civilization began to appear. A distant glow on the horizon promised a city, people, normalcy. I clung to that thought like a lifeline. I started to relax, just a fraction. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe this was what happened to guys who spent too much time alone in a metal box. That's when I saw him, a hitchhiker. He was standing under the next overpass, his thumb out, a duffel bag at his feet. It was a common sight, but everything about this was wrong. It was the middle of the night on a deserted highway. He was dressed in dark, tattered clothing, and his face. As my headlights illuminated him, I saw that his head was bowed, his face hidden in shadow. I was going too fast to stop even if I'd wanted to, which I absolutely did not. I blew past him, a gust of wind rocking my trailer. My eyes flicked to the driver's side mirror, expecting to see him recede into the darkness, but he wasn't there. The spot under the overpass was empty. My blood went cold. I snapped my head to look in the passenger side mirror, and there he was. He was standing in the middle of my lane, maybe 100 yards behind me, but he was no longer hitchhiking. He was standing perfectly still, and his head was now raised. He had no face. Just a smooth, dark expanse where his features should have been. He was the same absolute blackness as the thing in the web. A strangled sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a sob. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the truck surging forward. I didn't dare look in the mirrors again. I just stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged, painful hitches. The city lights in the distance were my only salvation. I just had to make it to the lights. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. The road was empty. The world was silent except for the roar of my engine. I started to believe I'd lost it, that the thing was gone. I allowed myself a single, shaky glance at the passenger seat, just to confirm it was empty. It was not. He was there, sitting in the passenger seat as if he'd been there for hours. The faceless, dark silhouette, he wasn't looking at me. He was just sitting there, a statue of solidified shadow. But I could feel a cold radiating from him, a deep, soul-sucking chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. The air in the cab grew thick and heavy, smelling of dust and decay and something ancient. I didn't scream. I couldn't. All the air had left my lungs. My body was frozen in sheer, unadulterated terror. This was it. This was how I died. Not in a crash, not from a heart attack, but from fright. Alone in my truck with a nightmare made flesh. The thing slowly, deliberately, turned its smooth, blank head towards me. There were no eyes, but I felt its gaze. It was a pressure, a weight on my mind, and with that pressure came images, not dreams, memories. I saw myself, years ago, dozing for just a second at the wheel and swerving into the other lane, the blaring horn of a car I'd nearly obliterated. I saw the faces of people I'd hurt, loved ones I'd abandoned, all the petty cruelties and deep regrets of a lifetime on the road. This thing, it wasn't just a nightmare, it was my nightmare. It was the embodiment of every bad dream the road had ever given me, every fear, every failure, all given form and trapped in that web. And now it was free, and it had found its source. The city lights were closer now, painting the inside of the cab with an orange sodium glow. The thing, the passenger, the nightmare, began to change. In the growing light, its absolute darkness seemed to waver, like heat haze on the desert floor. It became less solid, more translucent. The cold emanating from it began to lessen. It was unraveling. It turned its head away from me and looked out the windshield, towards the sprawling brightness of Phoenix. The pressure in my head receded, the terrible images fading like a bad dream upon waking. I could breathe again. I could move. I didn't dare speak, didn't dare make a sound. I just drove, my body trembling uncontrollably. As I passed the first city limit sign, the first streetlights, the first off-ramp crowded with normal people going about their normal lives, the silhouette simply dissolved. It didn't vanish in a puff of smoke, it faded, like a stain washed away by light, until there was nothing left in the passenger seat but the worn-out fabric and a lingering scent of dry, ancient dust. I drove the rest of the way to the warehouse in a complete daze. I unloaded my truck on autopilot, my hands shaking so badly I could barely sign the paperwork. The foreman made a joke about me looking like I'd seen a ghost. I just stared at him, unable to form a reply. I never took that route again. I found other runs, through the green hills of the east or up the rainy coast. But I never forgot. The Indians in Arizona were right. The road does dream. It dreams of your fatigue, your regrets, your loneliness. And those giant webs, they aren't there to protect you. They're there to trap the things that feed on you. But sometimes the trap fails. Sometimes a nightmare gets loose. And sometimes it needs a ride back to the edge of the light, to a place where it can no longer survive. I was the taxi driver for a bad dream. And every time I close my eyes, I still see that dark, trembling silhouette in my passenger seat, waiting for a long, dark road to call its home.